We think that if we have the right amount of money, if we have the right amount of recognition, we'll find perfect human happiness. Oh, babe. But I tried, and it didn't work. My life as a musician has taken me to a lot of very odd places. I grew up with two very angry parents who were screaming at each other and drinking. At an early age, I found music. And then there was this day when I learned how to mix two records together. It was like magic. In 1990, I put out a song called Go.
I thought it was fantastic. And a lot of other people thought that too.
All of a sudden, I had a big hit single, and every day I drank more. I started doing drugs. I was out of control. Then I learned my mom died, and I missed her funeral because I was in bed, drunk, passed out. Everything I'd ever wanted had been given to me, and I'd never been more depressed. Deep down, we assume that if anyone looks too closely, they'll be repelled. I was working on this album, Play, and it just sounded terrible to me.
Slowly but surely, everybody who discovered the music felt like there was something special there.
It started off small, and then it just kept selling more. I was able to take the fear and make it beautiful. None of this was expected. Making music has been baffling, confusing, but wonderful. It sounds like hyperbole, but music saved me.
Well, thank you for your pivoting like that. I appreciate it.
No worries.
How are you?
I mean, generally speaking, I feel like I don't have a lot to complain about. So, I mean, apart from like age and mortality and baldness, etc. Yeah, I mean, the pandemic seems to be abating.
Mercifully.
What's that?
Mercifully, yes.
Yeah, so like,
Yeah.
Generally speaking, my short-winded answer would be I'm fine.
Well, I appreciate that you actually took what typically is like one of those throwaway questions. How you doing? Fine, thanks. Moving on. But you actually took it like literally, which I can appreciate. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're about more or less the same. I might be a little bit older than you, but I think we're pretty much the same generation. You know, so it was interesting because, you know, I definitely, well, as I was watching Moby Doc, which, by the way, is a documentary about you, just so in case I didn't know if you're aware. And so anyway, I found it thoroughly entertaining, but also what surprised me, I think, in watching it was that it felt like here is this artful story, but at the same time, it was like, this is how I took my personal pain, the emotional injuries that I sort of was carrying around with me, and this is how I healed it. And it seems like it's largely through doing good work, like selfless work, living a lifestyle that wasn't about being, you know, about yourself, but really turning that outward. And that was a healthy way, whether it's through animal activism, veganism, other charities, the program.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, well, especially as I started to become more of a public figure musician, like I wanted nothing more than to find happiness through selfishness. You know, and so, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s, I did everything in my power to be as selfish as possible, you know, and whether it was my own ideas of selfishness, other people's ideas of selfishness. Like I kind of just bought into that idea that the key to happiness was, I don't know, was very self-involved, material, and conventional. But the wonderful thing is, the more I pursued selfishness, almost paradoxically, the less happy I was.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, well, in 2008, I finally had to admit to myself that my rabbit hole of alcoholism, drug addiction, materialism, promiscuity, selfishness, etc., I had just finally had to admit that the end result of this basket of selfishness was misery, was anxiety, depression, sickness, etc. And so as hard as it was to admit, I had to realize, like, okay, being a completely over-the-top selfish materialist addict just wasn't working. It wasn't creating any happiness. And I had read an interview with the Dalai Lama. Keeping in mind, I don't think of myself as a Buddhist, but I read an interview with the Dalai Lama, and he said that one of the keys to happiness is service, like having a purpose more than just quotidian selfishness. And then I did a bunch of 12-step work, which reinforced that idea that happiness comes when you're being less selfish. And the evidence indicates that that is actually the case, and also, sorry for rambling on.
No, you're not.
But we live in a world where so many people are so consumed with selfishness, and they all seem miserable. So if ever I question whether or not, unconstrained materialism and selfishness might not be a better way to live, I just look at the Trumps. I mean, like, they are the poster children for materialism and selfishness, and they seem like the least happy people on the planet.
Right. And they're spreading it around because they're very selfless in that one way.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So wait, you had been collaborating with Rob, Rob, right? The Gordon Bralver. How am I?
Bralver.
Bralver. Thank you. I'm sorry.
It's a weird last name. Yeah.
Well, no, more or less than my own, Shartok. But and at least we have last names, Moby.
I have one. I just
I know.
have never actually used it.
Yeah, it's worked well for you. So you're obviously onto something. But you guys had collaborated a lot before, right? Can you just say, like, you had written a couple of books. What was the seed here? Like, was it about sharing what you've discovered, what you kind of just described with a even broader audience? Because books are readers, then there's the rest of those folks out there who, aren't reading as much. But
I mean, really, like, on one hand, I fully understand that writing 2 memoirs and helping to produce a documentary about me might seem like over the top narcissism or solipsism, but I'd say there's a twofold utility, at least in my intention in doing, making Moby Doc, writing the memoirs, is first and foremost how much I've appreciated other people when they tell their story.
Right. Especially
people who are willing to tell their story and be honest in the process, or at least aspire to honesty in the process. And, whether that's at 12-step meetings, whether that's, other people's memoirs. And so I simply thought, well, I've been alive for a little while. I've had some odd experiences. I think I might have at times, interesting perspective. So why not try to share my story and maybe some of the things I've learned? So in the hope that, one, it might connect with someone and, maybe make them feel less alone, maybe give them insights into their own issues or their own experiences. But then also the selfish side is narrative therapy, I'll call it. It's, whether it's writing a memoir, making a movie, is almost gaining a better understanding of myself by telling my story and by being forced to tell my story in a fleshed out way. You know, because as you know, it's one thing to like sit in a therapist's office and describe your story, but oftentimes there's no real narrative. There isn't much of a narrative there. Whereas if I have to apply like critical narrative structural approaches to my story, it just simply makes me think about it differently and helps me gain more perspective on it.
That makes sense. I mean, a lot of people journal, but, you know, and then they might choose to do something maybe that reaches a larger audience because it's a way of connecting to humanity. It's through the ups and downs, the pain, as well as the pleasures that, you know, we experience. And, you know, so journaling is a very healthy way of people kind of doing what you're describing. But, you know, if there was a way to reach a larger audience like you have because of fame, success, what have you, then they might choose to do that too. It's just a different tool in the palette, or, you know, from the palette of.
Yeah, I mean, it's that dialectic. Like, I've made a lot of art, journaling, what have you, that I have never shared with anyone. And the thinking around it is very different than, you know, writing or film or music that you do share with someone. And when I've journaled in the past, like when I've kept journals in the past, they've been kind of vague, meandering. Other people might be a lot better at keeping journals, but I've just done it in a really half-assed way. Mm-hmm. And when you're writing a book or making a movie, you can't really be that. I guess you could be half-assed about it, but then no one would want to read your book or see your movie. And sure. And it's the rigor that's sort of imposed by the process that actually is one of the things that has given me sort of an awareness and hopefully some insights that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Well, that's kind of going to the next question I had, I guess, you know, but yeah, you were obviously the film came out, it hit some, did it hit like live festivals that were film festivals that were in person or?
No, it's been in some theaters, but in terms of festivals, basically what happened was
timing.
Finishing the movie, because I'd never finished a movie before.
Yeah.
The process of finishing the movie was such a long, complicated, laborious process that by the time it was done, we had to release it. Oh. And so we actually, because as you might know, I'm sure you know, submitting to film festivals, you have to submit long before the festival happens.
Right. You have to get
and we just simply, so for better or worse, we just didn't have the window in which we could even submit to different film festivals.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering if you did have some screenings, though, and how those went, and maybe if you were approached by people, or if they're like, I was wondering if people responding to it, like connecting with your message, you know? Yeah,
the only public screening, I mean, again, because it's been in some theaters, but the only public screening we had was actually last Friday on a rooftop here in Los Angeles for a couple of hundred people. And people seem to really like the movie, but I think people were also thrilled at being social for the first time in 14 months.
Right.
So I might have definitely, people's perspective on the movie might have been sort of informed by the thrill of actually being in a public setting for the first time in 14 months.
I'm sure that's the case. So you've had a very limited, perhaps other through maybe people you know. I mean, I imagine strangers don't have access to you, but maybe through, I don't know, through social media, maybe you can see how people, because it's obviously something that's out there that could be very helpful, you know, to people and inspiring. So I was just wondering if you were being able to have any metrics for that at all.
Only subjective, only, you know, doing interviews or talking to people at that screening. Because about 10 or more years ago, I realized that in order to keep or keep whatever little bit of sanity I have, I can't read reviews. So I have like a categorical blackout or embargo on any way in which I might exist as a public figure, meaning I don't read reviews, I don't watch myself on television, I don't listen to myself. And sorry, no offense, but like I wouldn't, if I do a podcast or do an interview, I just would never, I wouldn't read it.
This one will be an exception, I'm sure, because of our obvious bonding here. But no, I totally understand. I think it's a good idea.
Well, the good ones, because here's what I've learned is like the good, if it's a good review or a good article or a good podcast, that fuels my narcissism and self-involvement. And if it's bad, it makes me want to blow my brains out. So I was like, wow, there's really no benefit to me ever reading anything that's written about me or paying any attention to how I exist in a public capacity. So I love my simple little ignorance, like I go hiking, I read books, I work on music, I work on different philanthropic things, but I don't have much of an awareness of how I might exist in a public sphere.
Well, I totally understand. I actually wasn't even going to engage you about criticism because I don't see how it does help. And I myself don't write criticism because, first of all, while I respect good criticism, because it's doing more than just checking good or bad boxes, if it's, if it actually has something to contribute as an art form, but I figure, there's so much better writer. Why I wouldn't choose to read me because I tried it for a while and I found it utterly okay, I could put a thought together, but this is silly. But whereas I enjoy talking to people, I enjoy kind of, engaging with people on a personal level. But so I was actually really more interested in what maybe people that reached you, maybe if they had some sort of feeling about having seen the film and, if they were moved by it or something, if you had been able to get some response in that way, or is that also something kind of just sort of wouldn't, like when you wrote your books, maybe people approached you about those who had read the book?
Yeah, I mean, books, there's so much more actual information there. Yeah. And it's hard, and clearly the audience for books is a lot smaller. With the movie, I'm trying to think a few people I've spoken to have told me that they liked the movie, and a few people have responded to very different aspects of the movie. Sure. But, again, there's so much odd, random, at times, sort of psychedelic or surreal stuff in the movie. Right. It's hard, I think, it's hard for people to say like a blanket statement of like what specifically they responded to.
I understand. And also it's been out for what, 2 weeks maybe and change,
I guess, yeah, it's been out and it's only out so far in 6 English speaking countries because the like subtitles and dubbing has not happened yet. And so I guess it comes out in the rest of the world, 120 some odd countries on July 30th.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. Very good. But it is currently, at least in these 6 English speaking countries, at least it's available probably on a streaming platform near them.
Yeah, what I've learned is different countries have different primary streaming platforms. Like in the United States, it's Amazon and Netflix. iTunes. Yeah. In my ignorance as a film producer, I don't actually know what platforms it's on in other countries.
Well, they'll know. It's not that hard to find anymore. And it's called Moby Doc, and it's directed again by Rob Bralver.
Sure, that's exactly.
That is not right. It is not correct. I'm sorry. I actually was. I'm not home, and the lighting and everything else is throwing me off a little bit. My whole setup is a little different than my normal setup. So you weren't the only one kind of caught off guard. So, but but I did appreciate it. And I just for personal reasons, of course, as I already said at the beginning, we are of kind of roughly born around the same time. So maybe some of my cinematic or yours are similar to mine, because David Lynch, of course, is like, the Godfather in that way. And I'm just wondering what your connection was, and because he's like, is he maybe the only? I saw the doc a couple of months ago, but I was wondering if David Lynch was, well, he's certainly primarily speaking, like maybe the only guest talking ahead, for lack of another word.
Yeah. So originally, when we started working on the movie, we interviewed around 50 people. And then at some point a few years ago, Rob and I sort of decided that we wanted to make a music documentary unlike anything we'd seen, which I know that might sound a little sort of self-aggrandizing or presumptuous, but we thought that there's so many music documentaries, and honestly, they're very similar. And I used to be a documentary judge for Tribeca Film Festival.
Oh yeah, sure, of course. Which is
and
going
for
on
the
right
international,
now.
and for the International Documentary Association. So I've seen so many music docs, and so Rob and I just thought, okay, we want to do something different. Let's give ourselves those marching orders. Like, let's make something that's unlike anything we've seen. And so sadly, we had to jettison all of the interview footage we'd shot. But then we thought, okay, if David Lynch is willing to be in the movie, we have to include David Lynch, which is why he's the only person actually interviewed in the movie, which, because he and I have become friends. And also, as you sort of alluded to, like, he is in a very practical, real way, the godfather of American surrealist film. I mean, there've clearly been a lot of other American surrealists, but like, I can't think of anyone else who has incorporated so much experimental filmmaking and surrealist ethos and approaches into phenomenally commercial.
That's right.
Narrative and storytelling.
Yeah. It's he should never have in a million years been a commercial or mainstream filmmaker. Somehow or other, something's aligned, planets aligned. I don't know what happened, but against all odds, he became like this personality. Yeah,
I guess in his case, hard work, being in the right place at the right time. And also, I guess he got that early break, because he made Eraserhead, which clearly, if you watch Eraserhead, you don't think that his next step would be to make, an Academy Award winning movie. But the next thing he did was The Elephant Man. And, which one, I believe it was certainly nominated for Oscars, for Academy Awards. And that really is, I think, sort of like what introduced him to the world of commercial filmmaking and enabled him to make Blue Velvet, enabled him to make Twin Peaks, etc.
Etc. being Dune.
What's that?
I said etc. being Dune in this case, because he also made
I mean, Dune definitely, if I just rewatched it, there's some really wonderful elements, and boy, oh boy, are there some just mind-bogglingly terrible elements as well. But yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, I'm trying to think of someone else who has had a successful commercial career as a filmmaker, who has steeped themselves so much in experimentation and surrealism.
No, I don't think so. I really can't. No one comes to mind. Not like that. But I'm glad he was in it. It was great to see him. So it's great to see him. So
I mean, and he's living a delightful life. He spends 7 days a week just working in his little studio, painting, writing, drawing, editing, playing music, hanging out with his child. So he's I think probably in a very, very happy place.
That's good. And I also, even though we're talking about Moby Doc, which is available on various platforms, streaming platforms, hit that doc that he made a couple of years ago, The Dog.
Which one?
The David Lynch, that sort of autobiographical film the documentary that was made about David Lynch.
Oh, I know that there was a documentary made about him and about transcendental meditation. I didn't actually see that. But
But
as
this
far
one
as
was really about his coming up as an artist, like as a painter and as a, yeah.
Wow, I don't actually, I feel like an incredibly ignorant interview subject slash friend of David
Not
Lynch,
at
because
all.
I wasn't even aware of it.
Well, I'm going to tell you the name of it. If I can do this, I'm wasting your time, but I think you'll love seeing this movie. It's something with the dog, with the word dog in it, I think. I could be wrong. I should remember these things off the top of my head. Shame on me, but we'll wind it down. And thank you for coming on the video. I appreciate that. And here it is. Okay, it's called, I'm wrong about the title. I don't know where I pulled that off. Maybe it was the Patti Smith title I was thinking of. David Lynch, The Art of Life. Please see it, because I think you'll really enjoy it.
Okay, I'll watch it tonight.
He didn't direct it, but it's just him, and there's home movies, I believe, and it's really remarkable. It's a great document, very, very good. And I think it did very well. It's like 2 years ago, maybe it came out.
Okay.
It came out in 2017. You were probably busy making this film. That's probably what it was. Anyway, I look forward to one day crossing paths with you, and I wish you a lot of luck with the film and the rollouts on July. You said July 17th?
Oh no, it's currently out in Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada, Scotland, Ireland, England, and it comes out in the rest of the world July 30th.
July 30th. Yeah. So maybe what I'll do at that time is I'll do another round of whatever I can do another round of.
Okay.
Help promote the film, but it was really nice to talk to you, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. By the way, just curious, where are you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. I meant to share. I'm actually up in the Hudson Valley right now, and I'm kind of meandering my way down into the city tonight. I'm going to take the train down to New York City. And then I'm actually going to, other than a little foray on Father's Day, I'm going to be going to Los Angeles. I'm not going to be too far from you, actually.
Oh.
So
where in the Hudson Valley are you?
Well, I live in near Bard. So near Red Hook and Rhinebeck and that area. Are you familiar with it? But right now I'm a little further south. I'm in Cold Spring.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you can take Metro North then.
Yeah, which is what I'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, have a good weekend, and it was a real pleasure speaking with you.
I appreciate it. Same here.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right.